Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are honored to be here today. My name is Ann Haggart. I'm a co founder of the Breathe With Me Revolution. We are an organization working to move um, towards justice in this country and to hold everyone, especially allies who said they cared, allies who used hashtags and made posts, to now be accountable to take lifelong action towards racial justice in this country. We're also working to support leadership from Congresswoman Barbara Lee that moves towards a US Truth Commission that does what 40 other countries have done, which is be bold and brave enough to look at the truth of the dangerous legacies of this country that still inform violence, terror, and death, and actually use that truth as a fuel for restorative justice. That's a particular point for us in all of these discussions today, is that we are very much focused not on just uncovering the truth, but using that for solutions and things that restore what was stolen. So if anyone on this panel, anyone at any point today is in a position to use your network, your financial situation, anything you have to start to contribute, please reach out, because that's the end goal. With that, it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce Dr. Charles Chavis. Dr. Charles has a lot of titles, so I want to make sure I get them all right. He is the Assistant Professor of Conflict Resolution and History, founder and director of the John Mitchell Jr. Program for History, Justice, and Race at George Mason University. He's the director of African and African American Studies. He's also a historian, and he has put 5 years of work into understanding and becoming a fierce advocate in Salisbury, Maryland, of a story that you'll hear about today. And we are proud and honored to work with him. And it's my honor to hand it over to Dr. Charles.
Great. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. First, I want to thank so many people. Miss Jeannie Jones, the descendant of Matthew Williams, is joining us today. We also have Miss Shannie Shields. There's so many others who I have to thank. Professor Sherilyn Eiffel is one of those individuals as well that I have to say thanks to for her pioneering and groundbreaking work, spotlighting this community and the tragedy that took place 90 years ago. Before I introduce the film, I think it's important, as Ann said, 5 years ago, I went on this journey seeking out the truth after reading Professor Eiffel's monumental text on the courthouse lawn, trying to find justice really for the family. I did not know the descendants, who they were, where to even look. But my goal was to salvage the humanity of this individual, this young man, and to find out who he was and to find out what happened. So my pursuit originally and has always been justice. I mean, I hoped at the end of this process to be able to gift that to the descendants of Matthew Williams and to the community, that we can finally begin the process of healing. But while we're healing, we also have to make sure that we are focusing and keeping our eyes towards justice. Because in spite of it being 90 years ago, justice is still due to the descendants and also to this community that was dismantled as a result of this lynching. Next we're going to screen the film. And one of our amazing partners, Will Schwartz of the Maryland Lynching Project, is going to show the film. But right after that, you'll hear from a dear friend of mine, one of the executive producers of the film, Prophet, who is co-founder of Breathe With Me Revolution, also the Black Music Action Coalition, and he will be facilitating the dialogue and discussion and post-discussion panel. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Will Schwartz, who will show the film.
I would say by a little past Walnut Street. All on one side of the street were black people, families. And all on the other side of Poplar Hill Avenue were white. But everybody got along good. Children, if they had children, we played together. We didn't go to school together, but we played together. That was our environment that we had to live in. Everybody still had to try to get along with each other, regardless of what had happened.
I had no clue when I stumbled on those boxes at the Maryland State Archives that I would uncover a story that impacted a community such as this.
I heard about it through someone who was looking at archives in the Somerset Herald, where I used to work. It's one of the oldest papers in the state of Maryland. And the girl was doing a piece on the lynching. And then when I started questioning some of the family members that I thought knew about it. So I think that it was tragic. Blacks did not talk about it at all. All the articles in the Somerset County paper were deleted. You didn't find any record of that. So I think the black community was just scared. I think they felt that they didn't have a voice, couldn't fight the system. They controlled everything. They basically controlled the black community. In that sense, you better not speak up.
This is the building right here, Wacomico Hotel, across the street from where Matthew Williams was lynched. We know that there was so much activity at the hotel that was going on the night of the lynching. We know that there was a football game in town. There was two teams, rival teams from the area in town. And so there were thousands of people here. And what we don't oftentimes discover is that there were black workers here who saw their classmate, their friend, a member of their community being lynched.
Everybody had to stay in. We had to stay in the house. You could not go out.
One journalist who braved the racial terror of the day was Paul Henderson of the Baltimore Afro-American. And because of Paul Henderson, we have actual evidence from the actual lynching and the rope that is referenced in the witness accounts, the rope that Chief Greer provided the mob for Williams to be lynched with, is actually on display at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. This oil-soaked rope. And based on the historical photographs, the lynching would have taken place right around this area. A Pinkerton detective agent, who we now know walked these streets in Salisbury, as Patsy Johnson. Because of his journal, his daily accounts, we know who the members of the mob were. On this ground that we stand is the actual marker that was dedicated to Matthew Williams by the Equal Justice Initiative and the Lynching Memorial Task Force, which I've had the honor to work alongside the Salisbury Lynching Memorial Task Force. If we're brave enough, as this community has been, to confront this history, to deal with this history, to wrestle with it, to sit in it, then we can all realize justice and hopefully equality.
Wow, that was extremely powerful. Thank you, Charles, Dr. Charles, for bringing this issue to the forefront. This is an issue that, although happened 90 years ago, resonates so much in the times that we are living in. If ever there is a time, has been a time, for this country to begin dealing with the sort of, as this title put, this hidden truth that's right in is our view, is now. We've been pushing for a Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Commission to happen at the executive branch of the government, because until this country deals with this sort of history, buried history of what has happened to Black people in this country, and how it's still happening in this country, we will not be able to get past it and reconcile from it. So I thank all of those that was involved, and we are now going to open this up to our panel discussion so we can get everyone's involvement and feelings and hear our call to action. I want to first introduce to you our panel today, and I want to get the names right. We have a powerhouse panel, so I want to make sure I get these names correct here. First and foremost, we have Dr. Charles Chavis, as we mentioned, and we have the filmmakers, a brilliant husband and wife team that came together to create this film for us. Katrina and Samson Binutu. We want to thank you guys. They are the owners of CrueFilms, and they came together to produce this and film this for us. We also want to welcome the community activist that's been on the ground championing this issue for a long time and have allowed us to participate in that. As Dr. Charles mentioned, we have Jeannie Jones, the descendant of Matthew Williams, who this piece is based on. We also have Shannie Shields, who's a Salisbury activist that's been on the ground for a long time, fighting for justice and raising this issue. We are also joined by Dr. Of course, I was going to get mess this up now that we've spent so much time trying to get it right. Fakunle, I'm sorry, Dr. David Fakunle, who's the chair of the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We thank you guys and thank you women for being here and participating in what will be, I know, groundbreaking once this piece is in full form and the world are able to see what are some of the things that Dr. Chavis and the rest of you guys have been uncovering. So, Dr. Charles, did you want to immediately open up the questions, or did you want to have a little bit to say about what we just seen?
So I'd love to open up to the questions to the panelists, but I would like to briefly talk about, what led up to this. The film is really the outgrowth of the more than 5 years worth of work and research that I was doing, and for me, it was an extremely difficult more than 5 years, because a lot of the work and research that I was doing, I did it as I started off as a doctoral student at the Morgan State University, and I see so many of my mentors on the call today, which means so much. But a lot of what was produced and even the approach to this research was birthed out of my experience there at Morgan, where I had to be creative in terms of salvaging the lived experiences and the stories of people of African descent, which is not an easy process. And so I recognized early on when I was doing this research, after consulting and Dr. Sherlyn Eifel's book became a major support and tool for me to retrace the steps of what was missing. Oftentimes when we think about cases of racial terror lynching, there's always this lie that persists and lives up until this day, that lynchings took place at the hands of persons unknown. Black communities never have believed this. And to be quite honest, I don't believe white communities have either. But that is unfortunately the lie that has continued, and I did not take that that fueled me. That lie fueled me to continue and to search and seek out the true story to what happened to Matthew Williams. And this is when early on I discovered records from the state's attorney that had been hidden in the Maryland State Archives. I cautiously use the word hidden, and one of the reasons why the film is called Hidden in Full View, because it comes from actually one of my dissertation advisor is Dr. David Terry, who was a major supporter of my work, but also did a lot of work on documenting lynching in Maryland, establishing the Judge Lynch's Court database that documented racial care lynchings in the state of Maryland. He said, Charles, were they really hidden, or were they hidden in full view? And believe it or not, that's where the title comes from. And it speaks to a process that is consistent around archives and other institutions throughout this country. The records of Black people and oppressed people are never dealt with and secured the way that the records of white individuals and white communities are. And so after a year of research and running up against walls, I discovered boxes of investigation records out of order, in disarray, not labeled properly, in a storage, off-site storage facility in the state of the state archives in Maryland. And the contents of that box, I'll never forget. Me, as well as the state archivist at the time, the main archivist, Chris Haley, who's actually the nephew of Alex Haley, he came down and we went through the box and were shocked to see these materials. We were seeing literally documents, folders, over hundreds of pages of witness accounts of exactly what happened.
Incredible. And this is also going to be part of a book that you're writing?
Correct. So this is the book that's already written. It comes out in January, on January the 11th, and I lay all of this out in the book. I lay the entire story out, and I take all of the witness accounts from Black witnesses who originally we had thought were silent, and they were fearful. But one of the things that I wanted to do in this book, and also hopefully in a future documentary and within this short, was to highlight the heroism of Black leaders, Black individuals, and even Black everyday citizens. Paul Henderson is among a number of people whose story was never told. The lie was that Blacks were so scared they hid, they didn't say anything, but that couldn't be further from the truth. When I began discovering Dr. A.D. Brown, who was one of the central witnesses for the state, who was actually across the street when the altercation that led to the lynching happened. He has an entire journal and statements that he gave to the state's attorney that no one's ever known about. We also have records from the Pinkerton detective agent who the state hired to infiltrate the mob. But once the state recognized that you had a state's attorney that was involved with the lynching and complicit and culpable, then the governor at the time, Albert Ritchie, squashed the election and closed the case because he was afraid of the embarrassment that this would bring to him as governor. And so this is why these records were sitting in the state archives for so long, and why he squashed the investigation. And so the Pinkerton detective agent names members of the mob. He names everyone. And some of the brave witnesses whose stories aren't told include Dr. A.D. Brown, but also the great-grandfather of Jada Pinkett Smith was another key witness, Maslin Pinkett, who was actually a professor at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Princess Ed Academy. He was another major witness who actually named the white members of the mob who everyone had known. He did this on the stand during the grand jury, the hearing, and it's articulated in the notes from the state's attorney. There's just so much here that I discovered, and it's really a relief to be able to share this with the world. But before I did that, I had to chase down, hunt down, do whatever I could to find the descendants. And this is why I am so grateful to have Miss Jeannie Jones here. And it was over a year ago when, after hiring a genealogist, I tried as much as I can as a historian to try and find the descendants. I worked with a number of local leaders to try and find the descendants, and worked with the local coalition. We ran up against a wall, and it wasn't until I met with local genealogist and she was able to track down Miss Jeannie Jones, a descendant of Matthew Williams, and I feel like a burden was lifted, and I could finally share this story. And Miss Jeannie Jones is with us now.
Yeah, we're going to bring her in, and I don't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead, please.
Definitely, this story, and one of the pieces that I'm so impressed with you, and particularly there's often said that our story is an emotional story, right? Has the Black experience been as horrific as some of us act like it has been or suggest that it is? The fact that you have brought forth this sort of irrefutable evidence are pieces that folks are missing, which kind of brings me to the next two I want to mention. I love when you have Black talented creators come together, and the two filmmakers that put this film together for you, Samson and Katrina Binutu. I ask you guys this question, if you will. There are many projects that you could have picked to lend your time, resources, and talent to. Why did you feel this story was important, and what was your reasoning for connecting with Dr. Chavis around this?
I guess I can start off. So I actually met Dr. Chavis at church, so I remember initially meeting him. It was such a great spirit that, I got from him. He's always a joyful guy. He's always, cracking jokes. He was just always a pleasure to work with. So when he told us about this project, I was just like, I was intrigued, but I was saddened at the same time because I'm like, I've never heard of this story, and there's a lot of people of my generation that has never heard of this story as well. So I knew for us, that was one of the main reasons why we felt like we had to get it out, because historically and we know of many lynchings that have happened, but when something like this has happened in your backyard, we live in Maryland and this happened in Salisbury. It was one of those situations where it was like, it makes sense for us to tell this story. Like we felt like we have to tell this story. So that was one of the main reasons why we were compelled to tell it. Was just more so just trying to get people aware, especially people of our generation, aware of like the things that have happened here in our backyard in Maryland.
Yeah, completely agree, Sam. And just wanting to restate the fact that, we grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland. And when we graduated from high school here, the population was 63% Black. So we haven't really grown up in an age or a situation in Maryland where we've experienced overt or even really covert racism. So to hear this story being in the backyard in Salisbury, Maryland, we knew that we had to recover Matthew Williams' humanity that was so stripped from him on December 4th, 1931. And we also wanted to return in our small part the dignity of the community as well that was also erased.
When you say, and before I move on, when you say restore the dignity, that's so powerful of an idea. How important is film right now, or this particular medium in telling those stories? You think, Katrina?
It's completely necessary. It's imperative. Without visual storytelling, stories are erased. And thank God for books. Thank God for the fact that we can read and we have the skill set to find and search out information. But there's also the accessibility of visual mediums and storytelling that allows for people to get a quick glimpse and understand, wow, I need to do more research, or wow, what do I need to do to ensure that there's restorative justice in Salisbury? How can I help? Because in all seriousness, the socio-political context of Salisbury, Maryland is still affected by what happened with Matthew Williams on that day. And so we want to make sure that, the videos and whatever visuals that we dish out that speak to the depth and to the humanity and the dignity that we're trying to restore.
Awesome. I would go further to say that that's for that whole idea that you just mentioned about the need for it to happen in Salisbury is really speaks to the greater issue here in this country, the need to kind of expose these stories and deal with the realities of this country in a real way. Which brings me to Ms. Jones, in watching this piece, and even when Dr. Charles first brought it to our attention, quite honestly, all I can think about was your great grandmother. And what that experience had to have been. Experiencing watching this mob do what they did to her son. So as a descendant of this pain and of this great family, that were doing beautiful things in the town before this. And that's the whole idea that I think the power of this story is you start telling how beautiful of a town it was and how Black folk thrived in this space. But what do you want America and the world, the nation, to take from this story about your ancestor directly?
Thank you. What I want America and this beautiful, you know, audience of intimacy that we have right here is to know that the only thing my relative Matthew Williams on this date, 1931, um, horrifically lynched was for simply being Black. And even watching this film, as much as Dr. Charles Chavis has communicated with me, has graciously and someone earlier said fiercely been an advocate and director and leader on this project. Watching this film was like reopening the wound all over again. I was like, I've heard it, read it, seen it. He was gracious enough to walk me through the town and the process before we actually had the ceremony in Salisbury, and each and every time it it's just like somebody taking the wind right out of your chest, or like I said, just you know what it feels like to snatch a band-aid off of a wound that's not healed yet.
Mm.
And you know watching, I mean, the title couldn't be more perfect, hidden in full view. I'd like to thank Samson and Katrina, Dr. Charles, Equal Justice Initiative, everybody involved in the Maryland Lynching Coalition, because I don't know about you, but I don't know, and I'm asking everyone who can hear my voice, how many people do you know that are nicknamed Buddy? William Matthew Buddy Williams is what my ancestor's name was. He got the nickname Buddy from the community, from his and people that he actually worked for, that he was wrongfully lynched and charged for harming. And so again, I ask Jimmy, how many people do you know that are nicknamed Buddy today? That's a strong and and comforting name to be called Buddy. And so you have to think about this. This was a young man, 20s, but even earlier than that, that decided, you know, what a mindset, if you have a child, we were all children at one time, but the mindset of a middle high school young person is not to stop school to help the women in his family because the men had passed away. But this is who he was, and just worked tirelessly to support them, to be good, didn't do what a lot of children do at that age naturally, to hang out, convene, run around. I mean, his focus was, how many jobs can I work to support my household and the women that help me? And this is who this young man was, and what his spirit was all about. So again, I thank Dr. Charles and everybody that has spent tirelessly the research, the efforts in doing all of this that you are seeing and will continue to see. But again, the only thing my ancestor was guilty of was being Black, and the result was being lynched.
Mm.
Thank you.
Wow, that was powerful, and I would say thank you, Miss Jones, for sharing. You know, this is a personal story to your family, but this is an experience that took place in the community that speaks to the conditions that Black people were in and are in. And which leads me to Miss Shields. You've been a long time Salisbury activist. In the film, you talked about the silence that saturated the Black community. Can you tell us about Georgetown and what's kind of left of that community to this day?
Um, yes, I didn't grow up in Georgetown. And as I said before, people kept asking me about the lynching, authors who were writing their dissertations or something. They would come and look at the research in the papers, had a couple of them. And then I had to ask the older members of my family who are Pinkets. And my grandfather witnessed the lynching. he worked at the hotel, and they tell me that the Black employees at the time were told to go up on the roof so they could see it. And I thought about it the other day when I said they were afraid. I think it's almost like the police department who has a code of silence. I think the code was not to talk about it. Even in Somerset County, Mr. Krisha Dennis, she was one of the oldest Black people in the community. She would never be interviewed to talk about the lynching. They put it in the back of their mind. I don't think they forgot it, but they never talked about it. I heard my mother, my cousin raised me, her and her husband raised me. And I heard her talking about Dr. Brown, who's the family doctor, who was really afraid. And my mother said, well, why would he go down there and watch that? Well, he could pass as white. So I guess he felt comfortable enough to go down there and witness this. But I think someone said, the gentleman said that we lost the dignity, the community lost the dignity. I don't think we didn't lose dignity, I don't think, because life went on after the lynching. My grandfather went back to work. People went to school, they went to work. My mom, who had just graduated from high school in 1927, my mom Esther, she went on to go to Hampton University. So life just went on. But maybe in the back of their mind, I'm just saying because I wasn't there, they were cautious, mistrusting, had the feeling, even when they took our high school, Salisbury High, they always had the mentality that you couldn't beat the system. And I said, thank God for the civil rights movement. I never experienced racism. I never ever experienced racism until I went to the integrated schools. So because everybody had we had our own businesses, we had our own schools, we had our churches, and it traumatized us. And I think the last maybe 5 years, I kind of got over it a little bit because they tore down white high schools and building new schools. But this school, Salisbury High, was the first school I ever witnessed being tore down because they didn't want to, we call it sanitizing, because they didn't want the white kids to go to the old Salisbury High when they turned it in middle school. But I think what we need to learn about this, because I was talking to my oldest son, that we as Black folks, we're talking about justice. We're talking about equal justice. We need to give each other equal justice. We tend to be, and I'm talking in today's world, we tend to be jealous. We tend to not stick together. We tend to be reactive. But we should be more in a preventive mode and move on to positive things to unite our community. Because I believe if the white community saw that we were united, I think they would step back and be cautious what they do to us. But we're not united. We can't even stop shopping in the malls for one day because we got to go shopping. If you stop shopping and stop spending your money in the mall or in any of these stores, Black dollars is very important in this community.
Without
Black
question.
dollars.
Without
And if we stop shopping just one day, because the NAACP has promoted this and promoted this and promoted this, but we will not do it.
And I thank you for your work, for your years of activism out there, and you raised many great points that we need to and will unpack in terms of the Katrina talked about the social condition of Salisbury. As a result, I think America feels is dealing with that same issue, right? The Matthew Williams stories of this country has led to us being in this sort of psychological and social condition that we're in. David, you have done work. You're the chair of the Maryland Lynch Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Can you shed some light, my brother, on this issue, on this film, and some of the work you're doing and how you've been trying to bring these issues to the forefront?
Until the lion tells his or her side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. We are in a moment where we, as the lions and the lionesses, are taking the opportunity and the platform to tell our story. Because for 400 years, the tale of this hunt, this killing, this dismemberment, this mutilation, this rape has always glorified the hunter, the rapist, the dismemberer. And that is an injustice. So what Dr. Chavis is doing, what the Maryland Lynching Memorial Project is doing, what the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission is doing, is declaring our truth. And in doing so, declaring our humanity. So all of my work, whether chair of the commission, whether a researcher, a practitioner, an activist, an advocate, an educator, revolves around storytelling. It's about giving people the voice, not just the physical voice. I wish I could do that. And the metaphorical voice to declare their humanity. It's a universal art form. It's a universal science. We all have this capability. And again, it's not just with voice, it's with our images. It's with what we can dance, it's with what we can sing, it's with what we can knit, what we can quilt. All art and all culture is a form of storytelling. So this documentary is declaring and restoring and reviving and announcing the humanity of Matthew Williams. It's restoring the humanity of all of those Black citizens whose neighborhood was taken away, was destroyed. It's declaring that in order for this state, this region, this country to find any peace, you have to confront the total story. And it is ugly, it is brutal, it is inhumane. But in order to get the peace that we all want at the end of the day, you have to acknowledge this history. You have to be in it, sit in it, just like Charles said. You have to learn from it because this is our opportunity to dictate our present and our future.
Awesome, bro. Without question, we have Amber Green, who just joined us. She's a Salisbury activist and director of the Phoenix Youth Project. Amber, are you on the check-in with us?
How is everybody doing? I do apologize. I don't have my camera on, but I'm doing the mom thing right now, which I believe is so relatable to anyone listening to the words that are coming from the panelists, but also from the film's mouth, because, all I can think about is Matthew Williams' mom and, just how the impact of one generation has affected so many younger generations. And so I'm just excited to be here, and I appreciate, the space to do so.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for sharing. That the testament of the strength of women, right? You're able to mom, be a guest on the panel, help save the world, everything. I ask you a question. Indeed, I'm sure you've heard many people argue that we need to stop focus on the past. This happened 90 years ago. We know systemic racism is about outcomes, though. But that being said, what racial disparities do we continue to see within Salisbury, and what roles does this work play in addressing them? Is my question to you.
When we're talking about the racial disparities within Salisbury, I think we also have to talk about how it's how it's affecting the lower shore in general. Somerset, Worcester County, those are two very different counties when you're thinking about the economy and you're thinking about generational wealth. Somerset County is historically, the poorest county in the state. However, it is literally the epicenter of a lot of Black history. You have an HBCU, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, that is from that town. It is also rumored, I don't think it's ever been, confirmed, but, Princess Anne, as well as other areas within our lower shore, have been sundown towns. And so when we're looking at our racial disparities, we also have to look at, our justice system, our juvenile justice system. Currently, right now, you have a retired Wacomico County Circuit Court judge, overseeing the work of what Ocean City incident that happened in June, where teenagers were allegedly brutally attacked and by police officers on that boardwalk. So you see how we can't just say, "Oh, what's the racial disparities in Salisbury?" We have to look at the Lower Eastern Shore and how the Eastern Shore in its entirety have just been separated from the others, the rest of the state, and it started with Matthew Williams. And so we have to look at that. We have to look at our housing. We have to look at how, it started with Georgetown, but it's continuing on Church Street. It's continuing on Lake Street. It's continuing on streets that we know right now. And so when we talk about racial disparities, it's hitting every social issue, because I think that's the part where a lot of people aren't making that connection as far as why are we talking about lynchings, because it's literally ground zero. We have to go back to the beginning to realize how we got to this point right now.
It's interesting, Amber. Thank you for that. Brilliant, by the way. I just started to listen to the audio. I'm going to admit, listen to the audio version of the 1619 project, and one of the things that jumped at me, and I've been an activist since I was 13 years old, but just hearing it in this context about how really it is Black people who believe in America. It is Black people who believe in the promise of this country. It is Black people that have fought for the democracy of this country, for all of the privileges that others have been able to capitalize on because of the strike, because of the fight for justice that Black people have led since we've gotten here. It's all been about this country living up to its promise. And so I would ask anybody on the panel, if you can weigh in on this idea, this notion, following up on my question to Amber about the need to kind of let go of the past. If anyone can add or shed some additional light on the need to really, we can't move to the future if we do not truly understand what has happened in this country. Earlier, we talked about pulling off a Band-Aid, right? That Band-Aid to that open wound. That wound that hadn't been healed yet. America, racism is that open wound that has yet to be dealt with and yet to be cured. And we talk about the civil rights movement. This is something that happened 50 years ago, right? 45 years ago. So within our time, our life, Black people are still out here fighting for America to live up to its promise. So do anybody on the panel want to kind of shed some light on this need to continue this, and not just continue, but move past and actually get to a point of this country dealing with it in a real way?
Yeah, Prophet, I'd like to follow up. And I just thought about recently, wanted to remind everyone, Miss Audrey Matthews, who was featured in the film, of her important role in her work. We talk about making sure the truth is told, and it's really very rare when you have someone who is a living descendant of someone who was actually alive at the time the lynching took place. She may have been around 3 or 4 years old, but her family recounted to her what happened and what was going on that night. We still have Miss Audrey Matthews with us. We still have, in spite of everything, in spite of the state-sanctioned lynching, in spite of this racial terror and the destruction of this community, there is one institution that remains, and it's quite symbolic that it is a church, the Charles Chipman Cultural Center, in which Ms. Shannie leads. And this is the only remaining institution of the 19 original businesses, as well as homes of the Georgetown community that remains. And I think if we are to be honest about moving forward, we have to begin where there's still hope and where there's still a glimmer of light. And this institution, the Charles Chipman Cultural Institution, is that institution built by former slaves and 1830s. It withstood a civil war, but also racial terror. And I think we have to really recenter and focus our energy on supporting these local efforts in locations such as the Charles Shipman Cultural Center
Dr.
throughout this country.
Here's a point. Can you, if you will, discuss some of the effects post the lynching in terms of the businesses and the potential generational wealth that has been stolen from that community as a sort of a domino effect or a series of events that transpired post the lynching?
Yes, and so what we know, and this we've discovered some of this most recently. As I mentioned previously, the state's attorney at the time was culpable in this lynching, and we knew that right around 1931 there had been a state-sponsored and city-sponsored work to um, dismantle this community, specifically under the guise of expansion, highway expansion. However, like what happened in most cases, and this is also the case in Tulsa as well, that we saw within in the 50s, whenever, believe it or not, people don't realize that Greenwood did, to a certain extent, rebuild. And what's so disturbing about this unrelenting anti-Black violence, this attack, is that even when Georgetown and members and descendants tried to rebuild, the city continued and the state continued through similar processes that happened in Black communities throughout this country to dismantle and displace the descendants of this once prosperous community. Miss Audrey Matthews brilliantly from her. I can barely remember what to make sure my son has on the right outfit in the morning. And Miss Audrey literally took us through the Black business that she remembers, the beauty salon. She talked about everything that they had; it was theirs, their own community, and that was one of the most emotional parts of the interview, as well as the story. Hearing her talk about this community that she remembers, that is there no more. Hearing from the local surveys and others who came to her with these excuses regarding, the need for renovations. She talked about this, and she mentioned this in the interview that part of it wasn't shown, discussing, and she said at a certain point she got the idea and figured out that they were going to take it. It didn't matter what she did or what the people in the Black community did, that they were going to eventually take it. And that is what happened. And to this day, as I mentioned, out of the 19 original businesses, there was also reportedly a bank as well that was in this community prior to the 30s. Very prosperous community, but a number of Black businesses. There's only one building that remains, one institution that remains, and that's the Charles Shipman Cultural Center. And so we can think about the generational wealth. Even the bodies in the Black cemetery were exhumed.
I mean, when I heard that on the call the other day, it totally just took it to another level for me. When you talked about the Black bodies that were being exhumed, from the cemeteries, like the level of savage, that was displayed by these folks in that town, in this country, doesn't cease to amaze me. Like we read more and it get clearer and clearer of the atrocities. But I think it's important to make this connection of the generational wealth potentially stolen from a community as a result of this, and how that is, when you look at across America, the importance of this story is because although we are fighting for justice for Matthew Williams, we are understanding that he represents millions many Black men and women across this nation that have been brutally murdered, strictly because of racism. And as a result of that, the systemic racism that's been instituted in this country has led to this sort of robbing Black America of its wealth, and this sort of new narrative that we haven't done anything for this country, when in all actuality we have built this country and have provided the economic base for this country. And I'm so proud that Dr. Charles and his team is willing to lead this fight to expose this, because in exposing this, we expose the truth in this country, and hopefully the idea is that we move past it. I know we're waiting for Dr. Marcus to join us, but I have a question, if you will, for Ms. Jones. have throughout the years have there been other efforts made by other journalists or other filmmakers around this issue?
No, and I'm glad you guys are making reference to all of this. And I think that, again, what this initiative is doing, it will spark openings for more storytelling. And I think that, again, like you guys are saying, it goes back to even, you know, being fearful of saying anything. Still, the feelings are still fresh. You know, will you get the finance? Will you have you know a Samson and Katrina to pick up the phone and say, I support you, I'm going to push through? Those same things are still so relevant today. I mean, you got to wonder who's going to fund you discussing any of these things. So this is such an important process to expose and tell. And this is the type of content that needs to be on heavy turbo rotation so that even the filmmakers of Gen Z see and understand what they're seeing. I mean, you got to look at everything our babies are going through today. I too came up blessed and well. I mean, our babies are going through some of the darkest times that, I mean, in history and ever. So, this alone needs to be, of course, doctor, I know you got a lot on your plate, but or even, a film course on the storytelling of history. Imagine that in the level of research. I think about the amazing story of the Bruce family here in Los Angeles, who recently Governor Newsom was just giving back their property. If anybody's familiar with the Manhattan Beach, the lucrative Manhattan Beach area, their family owned that, and it was just stripped, taken. Imagine the multi millions of dollars in that level of generational wealth from back then up until now, what that family would have been empowered to do. But, by the grace of God, they have been granted their property back just recently, knowing that, it was just taken. And so, change is happening, and it's because of platforms and content and conversations like this. So, let's continue and even be more progressive and deliberate in what we're doing.
Thank you for that. You are spot on. Listen, this idea that the idea of the black contribution to this country, to this nation, and particularly the economic base, has been so misconstrued and on purpose, right? So we need to really discuss that because, as you talked about the Manhattan Beach, can you imagine? Can we just open our minds for a second and think about what that means and what that potentially means across this country in terms of the wealth that has been robbed from Black America? In a very real way. Listen, at some point, this country has to deal with this. Look, no, you did not enslave our people, right? No, you did not write laws that enslave our people, right? But every person that's here in this country, that's alive, that's breathing right now, have the opportunity to right these wrongs, right? You talk about the Generation Z. This will be the generation that can completely abolish this idea that we call racism. These are choices that people are making to keep one folk feeling inferior while other folk feel superior. Let's end that by dealing with the truth. And I thank you guys for allowing us even the opportunity to dig into this sort of personal family story as an example of one of the horrific experiences here in this country. Let me ask Samson, as a young filmmaker, kind of represent this young generation. Ms. Jones talked about the idea of the need, rather, for young people to kind of, hear these stories. Do you feel that because of the time that we're living in now, these stories are easier to deliver to the public than maybe 10, 15 years ago through the sort of internet opportunities we have? And
I would definitely say yes. Obviously, there's a lot more platforms to be able to tell these stories on. So social media is definitely a thing. YouTube, Instagram, all those different platforms. So I think it's just a matter of like, how can we creatively reach a generation of people who are used to storytelling being given to them a certain type of way. There are some people who do not like reading books. There are some people who may not necessarily like listening to podcasts. There are some people who don't consider themselves obviously to be historians, but it doesn't mean that they shouldn't know about the history of this country, especially when it comes to their people. So I think it's more so just like, it's definitely easier, but it's still the challenge of how do we make sure we're delivering this message that is digestible, where people can actually consume what they're watching and actually take something away from it.
Excellent point. And I think I just got a note that the good professor has just arrived. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. Marcus Hunter as we sit here and discuss this idea of information, delivering information, being able to do it in such a way that's digestible, as you talked about, Brother Samson. Dr. Marcus Anthony has been working on what I believe will be that answer to deliver that information in sort of the way that this generations to come will be able to receive it. So please help me welcome Brother Dr. Marcus Anthony Hunter.
Peace, everybody. Thank you so much. Shout out to everybody involved in making this happen. This is a very wonderful, wonderful event. And you know, the thing I'll just begin by offering is when we get into categories or conversations like the ones we're having, a lot of times our tendency is to really be focused on the outcome. And I understand that, right? Like racism is real, systemic inequity is real. And so we want to see that ended. At the same time, I think that we do ourselves a disservice if we don't understand that we are amidst a process that is very different than what our ancestors were afforded, where you can actually watch videos, make videos of this nature, where the term reparations is actually discussed. You know, when Queen Mother Audley Moore would talk about reparations in the 60s, people, Black people, treated her like she was a leftist radical person that was way outside of our domain of vocabulary. So I also just say that what we're also doing is practicing a new vocabulary that I think in and of itself is a form of progress that we ought to acknowledge. That it's important to know that we're taking down stories that existed, as I said, 90 years or so. But now we actually get to be witnesses to see that story come forward. And I think in and of itself, that is a true sign that the ancestors are with us. So I just want to offer encouragement as I open in here to say, I know we are still waiting for legislation. We're still waiting. You know, I think about the 12 days of reparations, what Joe Biden owes to me, 10, 12, you can go down a list. But in the meantime, we actually are having these discussions. And I think these discussions are really a reflection and symbol of how far we have come as a people, as a culture, and also the work really does have an outcome on the horizon. That is my truest belief.
Dr. Marcus, if you don't mind, can you just go into a little work that you're doing around truth, racial healing, and transformation? I think it's important to connect these dots, if you will.
Yeah, no problem. 4 years ago, I was approached by Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who wanted to establish the United States' first ever Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Commission. As many people are probably aware, there is this pattern and practice called truth and reconciliation. So that's happened in Rwanda post the genocide. It's happened in Germany after the Holocaust. It happened in South Africa at the end of apartheid, but it has not happened in the United States. And one thing that Representative Lee was really keen on is in her work working in the United Nations as the representative for Congress there, she's very aware of how often America is paying for other countries to do truth work. They're all about it. Crimes against humanity, let's go do something about it. And so what she wanted to see is America actually visit with its own history, properly acknowledge, and really get to the truth of what has happened here. Because ultimately, what is America was really predicated on defaming the humanity of African Black people who arrived involuntarily, and also Native and Indigenous people who were already here. They are framed as savages, so that way you can't reason with a savage about property, you can just take it. And with Black people, they were framed as property. So I can do whatever I want with property. And for folks who are familiar with the US Constitution, property and the right to property and your relationship to property is a hallmark of the whole constitutional experience. So you get two sets of human beings that are recategorized either as less than a savage or not human at all. And so the idea of the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Commission is to get to the heart of that origin story and to say we're not drudging it up so that people feel bad about themselves, but to say that we all of us, white, Black, all in between, Native American, Indigenous, Puerto Rican, Filipino, Dominican, we all need a healing because this concept of race has done deep harm to our humanity because it is a false premise. It's a made up idea, and we really bought into it time and time again, nation after nation. And ultimately, when you defame the humanity of Black people, you ultimately are defaming your own humanity because humanity is something we divinely share. It is not something that God gives to one person and doesn't give to the next person. It is something that is a shared experience. And when we allow one group to be witnesses of dehumanization, and we don't see that mirror back in ourselves, that is what the truth is about, getting to that so that we can heal from that and then create transformational policies that help mitigate, prevent, and also help imagine a world where we have not systemic inequity, but instead systemic equity, not systemic racism, but instead systemic humanity. So thinking about all of these things is creating systems that uphold our shared humanity, systems that uphold equity, as opposed to what we have, which is the inverse.
That's awesome. That's awesome. This work that we're doing, that all of us are doing, is critically important. And we want to hear from the people. We want to hear from those who watched this film, who participated and listened to this panel conversation. And so if you have questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat. They're going to shoot the questions over to me so that I can move through this as effectively and efficiently as possible. First question is from Ms. Jones, I'm sorry. How did the Williams family keep body and soul together after Buddy was taken from them?
Well, like one of the panelists said earlier, it is such a strong testament and emotional scar in terms of talking about anything. Is a consistent history, even currently, in our community to not say much or too much about any particular thing. We just getting to a point of through COVID to make what self-care and mental health that it's okay to discuss these things or to talk about it. So I don't feel that those things were ever expressed, exercised, or that even ever happened in terms of how it dealt, how it coped. Everything was, just don't bring it up. And then it's always, whispers. And when I think about the Blacks and Handy side of my family descendants of directly with Matthew Williams, it was just very dark. It was very dark and quiet, and you push through and you remain strong and you still make it happen. And it's exactly what they did. And through it all, a lot of my that side of family, incredible educators, principals, just developers, engineers, and they carried this weight of silence. So the answer to that is I don't believe that they ever really dealt with it. They pushed through, and that's unfortunate.
Next question, Dr. Charles. Will this be a full-length documentary at some point?
Yes, of course, that is the goal. But of course, as I believe others have mentioned, we are hoping to secure funding, and we're thankful for the initial funding that we received to be able to do this short and to be able to do a lot of the local work that we're doing from Humanity United, as well as the support of George Mason University in this work. And so we're hoping that people will join, funders and others will join George Mason as well as Humanity United in supporting this work. And also, it's important to also recognize that we're hoping to establish an archive for cultural and racial healing, which is the brain child of Dr. Marcus Anthony Hunter. Is extremely modest, but that's another project in which we're hoping to galvanize this work here and use the Salisbury community, their story, highlight their story to show that this is one of many cases and communities in America that need healing and they need the truth to be told. And the best way to do that is to make sure that we prioritize the local community archives institutions to make sure that we'll never have to find a dismantled box of records pertaining to Black people again. It'll be in our most sacred spaces, in our churches, in our communities. And so, Brother Marcus, I'd love for you to kind of talk about that if you could. But we're looking for funding, as I mentioned, and we're thankful for the funding that we've received.
Oh yeah, no problem. I mean, shout out to you, Charles, and the team for the incredible work that you all did. And I just think it really shows, like, you know, how much can be done in less than 15 minutes as well. Like, how much can you learn? And to Samson's point earlier, thinking about generational changes and how people like to receive information, you know, right before the pandemic, there's a failed billionaire, you know, corporation called Quibi, which had done the science that said 10 minutes or less, you know, like that's where we were. And in many ways, I think the timing of this piece also reminds me a lot of the patron saint of Black justice, George Floyd, and how long his video was, you know, effectively. Like, so how long does it take before we actually get it? To something that Charles was mentioning, I think the overall point, and this is just something that comes from my own background as like a kid who grew up in a Black Baptist church that had, you know, working class grandparents, and they would always say, the truth is the light. And I would think to myself, what does that mean? And then we all know the flip side is whatever is done in the dark will come to the light. You know, that's a classic Black phrase, you know, and taken together, what it really does do is amplify what we're all up to. And that is what we want to create is an educational digital resource that's a repository for accountability, but also can be accessed by kindergartners, first graders, second graders, third graders, by professionals, economists, policymakers, where you can actually go somewhere and get the information, whether it be photographs, videos, diaries, deeds, leases. We heard earlier from Ms. Jones about the point about Manhattan Beach, like to actually see the lease, the deeds, you know, the mortgages, get that information. So that way everything doesn't always seem like it's Black fantasy. You know, for many, many years, people thought Black people were making up Tulsa. You know, because what we learned from that example is we cannot rely on our news reporters to tell us the truth. We cannot rely on national news corporations to tell the United States something that's happening in one part of the country and making it relevant. So the idea here is what we're trying to do is work with library partners, universities, community libraries, public libraries, and develop a digital repository that we call the Archives for Racial and Cultural Healing. The idea is that these are educational resources that promote our racial and cultural healing and actually give us a foundation to work from so that it isn't based on this person's idea about what happened versus another person's, but instead a go-to resource that also, which is one of our biggest ambitions, is simultaneously closes the digital divide, which we know is racialized and classed at the same time.
And that kind of goes into a question that we have here from the great E.R. Ship. Dr. Chavis, you mentioned archives that do not contain records or do not properly maintain records that give the Black side of history. How do you find the answers via sources that have not been preserved by municipalities, universities, state archives, and museums? Because we don't have what Dr. Marcus have brilliantly described yet, how have you been able to access some of this information?
Well, so I see myself, and I get this from early on when I was a teen, about middle school. My dad showed me the film Men of Honor with Cuba Gooding Jr. And one of the lines that stuck with me, it was the line about being a Navy man. He said a Navy man is a salvaging expert, right? So if it's hidden, you know, you go to the depths of the earth to find it. And for me, what I had to do in my whole approach to research you have to, if you're looking for, if we know that systemic racism is a reality, right? And then even our institutions are also the outcomes within our institutions, the way they're structured, they also are racist in a sense, right? And so as a result of that, certain narratives, certain records are going to be privileged and preserved, right, in a certain way, especially for state archives specifically whose mandates is to preserve the empirical records, state licenses, and things like that. Not to preserve records of an investigation or case of a black community, or to preserve records pertaining to land disposition, right? Especially when you have to think about it. As I mentioned, it's important for us to note that these lynchings are state-sanctioned murders. We have to get over this idea that we don't know the information. Most cases in lynching throughout the country, when we think about these cases, we know that law enforcement, local, both in state, oftentimes were complicit, if not culpable, and involved in these cases. And so why would an institution, a state institution, preserve and keep the receipts, as my young nephew would say, for the deeds in which they're culpable in? So what I've had to do, when you're looking for things that have been discarded, you go to the trash. You go to places where things are overlooked. And what I had to end up doing, I noticed that they were stored off site in a location off site that is very difficult to get access to. But I was able to find an actual list of records that are pretty much have not been cataloged. It was 800-page document that laid out records that just with a basic title, investigation records, that they haven't been processed. And that's really the case at a lot of archival institutions. And to be fair, it's important to understand some of this has to do with funding as well, but also when you think about the Maryland State Archives going all the way back to the 1600s, there's just not funding coming into these institutions to be able to prioritize them. But also there should be an obligation within the state as well, I believe, to do a better job, specifically pertaining to the records of the enslaved, but also records such as this, right? And so we know that manumission records and other records are also sitting there, in some cases, in some archives throughout this country, deteriorating because the state is not a priority, right? We can no longer wait for these records, our records, the records of Black communities to become a priority to states and institutions. We have to begin the work ourselves. And so I hopefully that answered Professor Shipp. And thank you so much, Professor Shipp, for joining us as well.
You tapped on something in terms of financing. I will ask everybody that's watching now, that's participating, if you can, please donate. In that link, there's an opportunity to donate. Donate some money. Let's spend some of our dollars on actually creating the opportunity for our stories to be properly told and for us to reach a point to get some justice here, right? We can't wait for other folks to tell our story. We've been doing that for 400 plus years, and we see what the narratives they've come up with. So I encourage everyone in this giving season, let's give ourselves a gift and actually give to this organization so we can keep doing this work. I seen a question that disappeared, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I think it was a good question by Ms. Green. Does anyone on the panel feel that religion has an impact on our response or lack of response to the racial inequities that we experience?
That was an excellent question, and I jumped right in there and responded, so I apologize. That may be why I disappeared.
Yeah. I'm moderating. I'm acting like I'm all tech savvy, but I have some of the stuff that's going on here. So
Right. A lot going on.
Q&A. I said, let me see what that.
I was on it. Look, I was your co-producer back here.
You have a great answer as I'm reading through it now. Why don't you deliver to the people your answer?
Yeah, absolutely. I speak about this very topic often, and not to specifically call out any particular church, but I think as a whole, we know how much of an institution the church has been and is and will forever be in the community. However, I often say that with a church so embedded in each community, each block, region, I often say I can't even imagine if they just adopted just their region, not so much mega or how integrated we are with social media, which has done so good and for a lot of reasons. For every negative or bullet somebody can say, there has been so much good. Just like you constantly bring up Brother George Floyd. I mean, I thank God for that generation. The young lady who was bold enough to videotape. Imagine if she had not. So, but going back to the church, I just can't imagine if they were passionate just about their own blocks and education, finance, everything that a community needs to thrive and to build on. What would actually happen? I just don't see that. And if it is, it's when it's reactive. When something happens, but I'm just talking about being consistent, and that is my biggest challenge on trying to get us to do what we're doing consistently, like Dr. Charles has done. Has been a consistent movement on this particular lynching of my ancestor. Just this, he's focused on this and this, and look at what has happened. Look at what has blossomed. Look at the education. Look what is happening. The legs of the development of the change that is happening just from being focused on this. So I don't think that it is making the impact that it should within their own block, because much more would be done. That is my response.
I'm so happy I'm a panelist. I mean, not a panelist, and I'm not. I'm not. Because this, we will go so into another documentary.
May I say something?
Absolutely, sister.
We're talking about Salisbury. The church where the Chipman Center is, the downstairs, was the first church and school and meeting place for freedmen and slaves. The church during the 50s and during my time were the center of the Black community. You saw the ministers working within the community. You saw the ministers being substitute teachers because I guess lack of receiving money. We have 4 large churches in the community on the west side of Salisbury. I think the ministers have not done what they're supposed to do. When you preach to your congregation, you're preaching to your congregation, but they don't tend to go out into the communities, as Ms. Jones said, in the environment that they are serving around their church. If you just adopted a family or you just adopted your block, now we have a big white church that's come into the Church Street area and adopted the whole block to the point one success story, the girl went to college. They're getting ready to build a church over there. So I'm just saying that's a white church. But to me, the Black churches, I'm going to speak in the sense of Salisbury, they have not stepped up to the plate. And the last minister that really was politically active and actually built a senior center for elderly Blacks, he died in the 80s. And there has never been another pastor like him that has not been afraid to talk and stand up to injustice. And we dearly miss his kind of leadership. And that's what we need to have in Salisbury and other communities, pastors that are not afraid to buck the establishment.
Excellent. Another question we have, someone wrote, did I hear someone mention a connection between Matthew Williams' lynching and the road construction at the time in Salisbury? Was there a connection between the two?
No, I can answer that. The road connection came, putting Route 50 through the neighborhood was that back in the late 50s and early 60s, because I lived on the other side of town, and my father, who raised, the gentleman who raised me, we moved out where I'm living now. The Houston Cemetery, part of it is still standing, which that was a project that me and the American Legion, we were working on it to help cut the grass. We had to pay $2,500 this year to keep the grass maintained. But that highway did not come through until the late 50s, early 60s.
Okay. All right. I also see that we have the great Dr. Paul Zeitz on with us. Dr. Paul Zeitz have been working with Dr. Marcus and Dr. Charles and myself and Ann and Lee Blake and forming this sort of global truth commission team and army that we are assembling. And he's been doing great work at getting this bill pushed through. So if you don't know, tap in with Dr. Paul Zeitz around this issue. Another question I have from an anonymous attendee, Dr. Chavis, this documentary and your book are indicative of how institutions such as Maryland State Archives still work precisely as they were designed to deny Black people a claim to their history, dignity, and lives. For this reason, how are practices such as the oral history and community archiving important to your work?
They're essential. I mean, they're the lifeblood in many senses. Without the stories, we would never know where to go and search. I would never know to look in the state archives if it wasn't for doing oral history interviews, talking to descendants, but also reading the newspapers from the Baltimore Afro American, the investigations that they were doing during the time. Clarence Mitchell and others, they came down to the shore and preserve this history for us, and we're able to piece it together, which is what we've always had to do in terms of the Black community. To, as I mentioned, salvaging the story together with what we've been given. Right, we use the oral tradition, but also we're able to utilize the Black press and tie the pieces together. And really, what's powerful about this is oftentimes that family members and descendants, because it was never spoken of in terms of the family, who suffer these injustices, you don't recognize the extent and the role, and so for I think it's really essential that we understand. Yes, the institutions aren't designed, but again, I believe we have to stop waiting on these institutions, and we have to take possession as best we can of our materials and records and preserve them. We can't leave that to institutions to do that.
And again, and to do that, it takes financing. You know, one of the things I say, thank God for the Harry Belafontes and all of those that were willing to use their dollars to actually back the movement, right? Here we are now dealing in the tech space, dealing with more wealth than we ever have seen in this country globally, but yet, we are underfinancing this movement. So I, again, encourage everyone as we are living in this holiday season, in this time of giving, it is important that we put our dollars where our mind and our hearts are. And hey, we are dealing with generational wealth being robbed from us. So we know that we don't have, many of us the economic freedom to just give the way we would like to at times. But listen, everything helps. So don't be afraid. Any donation you have, I know I sound like a preacher now, especially, but we need it. We need it. I believe in what Dr. Charles is doing. I believe in his mission. And if we talk about archives, we talked about the oral history, we talked about preserving and so kind of like redirecting this narrative about the experience that Black people have and the contributions that Black people have made to this country in this economic base. We have to finance it. All right, we have another question. Dr. Charles, they are asking, will this be available? Someone came in late, so they are asking, is the short available to view after this is over somewhere?
Yeah, yes, it will be available. And we are on our website, you'll have opportunity to request a screening. And we will, with the support of our funders, offer those screenings and Resources to members of the community and to those who request to see the film.
All right, Stephanie Kimmons just asked if we can put up the link to the donation. So can someone throw that in the chat right now so folk can move on the impulse? We got a hot button right now. Let's go ahead and got some on the ropes here. Let's get some donations flowing.
Let's give now.
Yes, I placed the link there.
Professor Ship asked for that. Also post the link to the website, please, in the chat. Please post the link to the website. We are actually winding down, and I know we have a few minutes left. I want to allow everyone, if you can, to take 2 minutes or less and just kind of wrap up, sum up your experience in Salisbury as it relates to this project, and what you will hope to see come from this in our efforts. I'm going to start with the filmmakers, Katrina and Samson, and then we'll move along the line.
I would just say I would just hope people feel encouraged to, take action. Whether that's like donating, whether that's doing more research on other similar stories that has happened in the past, and taking the initiative to tell those stories. This is just one of many stories that need to be told. So the whole goal is, of course, awareness, but it's also to like push forward other stories that need to be told for the awareness of our generation specifically.
Agreed. Also, being in Salisbury was, and meeting Miss Shannie and meeting Miss Aubrey was just an amazing moment. That's a moment I will forever put in a capsule in my memory, because it's to hear from people's firsthand experiences, even as descendants, and hearing how Georgetown community changed over time. That is something that thankfully we are seeing, as Professor Marcus was saying, we're seeing a lot of progress, and we can actually see this progress and document it. And it's no longer something that is stagnant in the past, but we're seeing something come out of this. So also just not to give up, not to lose hope, not to lose heart. There's work to be done, but it's working, it's happening.
Brother David, we're going to pass the mic to you.
All right. So my hope with this film and all the work associated with uncovering and elevating the history and the stories of racial terror lynchings in Maryland, I would hope that people are empowered, not just encouraged, but empowered to explore the truth and embrace the truth, because it is the light. It is what will set us free. That sounds cliche, but it's all true.
Without question.
And in conjunction with the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it empowers us to go as deeply as we can with the opportunity that we have to make sure every Marylander knows this story, to make sure people across the United States know the story, that other states in this country are empowered to explore the history like Maryland is doing. So it's all about the movement towards truth, the movement towards acceptance and acknowledgement of what this country is truly all about, and at the same time, what this country can truly be.
Come on.
Because that's all we want.
Come on, Doctor. Beautiful. Can you put your contact link in the chat so people know how to learn more about the truth of the Maryland Lynching Truth Commission? I know I jacked that up, but yeah, I know what I mean. Please put the information so we can continue to stay in communication and contact with you. We're going to pass the mic now to Sister Amber Gray. All right, we're going to pass the mic to Jeannie Jones. Why don't you go ahead and give us your closing sentiments, sis?
Absolutely. Again, appreciate you. Thank you, Prophet, for your moderation today, Dr. Charles, and each and every panelist, everybody that is participating, and just even, took the time to listen, understand what we, are the church. This was a ministry, and it's all about what we do outside of the four walls. So I'm excited. Every time we go through this, I go through being hurt again, but then motivated and charged up about what we're doing, how we're going to do it, and again, being active, how we are supporting each other. Just like if all of us just give whatever you can to this movement, what's going to happen next, and to what all of us are doing. So I encourage us to stay connected. Let's move in unity, all of us together. And yeah, it's all going to be better. Thank you.
We thank you. I'll pass it now to Miss Shannie Shields. Thank you again, sis, for all that you have been doing out there. I can feel your strength and your passion through the screen, and so thank you. We all can be doing a whole bunch of other things, but to lend our lives to this work, I think is so important and speaks to who you are and who we will be beyond. Right? We want to all be great ancestors, and this is the type of work that leads us down that path. I will then turn the mic before we do to Brother Chavis. Ann Haggard, you've been holding us down, the work that you've been doing. Please, give us your last remarks as it relates to the work we're doing in this film.
I want to thank everyone for coming today. I want to thank the Maryland Lynching Memorial Commission for hosting. I hope I got that right. Also to Humanity United. Really, we would not have been able to make this film without their support. Mostly, I'd like to call out everybody that got very comfortable with the hashtag last June, Black Lives Matter. You marched, you said you cared, you came out of your house. It's time for action, and it's on all of us to be allies, support Black leadership, community-led solutions, and move beyond performance art to real justice. So I'll spend the rest of my life standing to support this. Thank you.
Wow, that was beautiful, Ann. And Ann, I'm gonna tell you, she's one of those that has forget moving past the hashtag. She was out there before hashtags were hashtags. She comes from a world of understanding philanthropy and the corporate world, and she's been able to finagle that system and made sure that people who really needed money got it. And she's taken this sort of revolutionary approach and brought it over here with Fame Currency and Breathe With Me. And we have this sort of anti-charity approach towards the work that we're doing. Our goal is to end charity, right? This sort of pharmaceutical approach to our issue. We have to every generation keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting. Then that means there's a flawed system that needs to be dismantled, or we need, to kind of be clear on what our goals are. So I thank Ann for the work that she has done. There's $900 billion a year in charity given in this country, and this country is still effed up. So that means there's a disconnect between that money and the people that actually need it. And so Ann has spent a large part of her life ensuring that those people get it, and now full-time as what we're doing over here with Breathe With Me and Fame Currency. So thank you, Ann, for all that you are and all that you do. I will get the last closing remarks from our leader in this mission here, Dr. Charles. Please tell us what you hope to gain from this, and hopefully this have met your expectations, but tell us what our marching orders are from here.
Listen, thank you so much, Prophet. I want to thank everyone on this panel. I want to thank, oh my goodness, my family as well. My wife's been a major supporter, sleepless nights. I've been in tears working on this project and to prepare this gift for the family and for the community in the book, but also in this film. And what I hope to be just the beginning. It's so important. I learned this from one of my friends who's on the call, Amber Green, who says oftentimes this is just the beginning. And that is indeed what this is. This film represents only the beginning of a long process towards healing and justice. And I'm so thankful for all of our partners. I'm thankful for Humanity United. I'm thankful for Miss Audrey Matthews, Miss Shannie Shields, Miss Jeannie Jones, strong Black women who are carrying this country in many ways through everything that we're going through. Amber Green as well, Professor Sherilyn Eiffel, so many to thank. Pretty sure I'm forgetting someone. Our dear friend Lee Blake as well. I would like to thank her also, as well as Ann, an amazing ally and supporter of this work. Thank you all so much, and definitely stay tuned. You'll be able to hear from us very soon. The donation link was placed in the chat. Also, you'll see a link to the film where you can sign up for a screening. But stay tuned. This is the beginning, and be well and be safe, everyone. God bless.